I'm Pam Hanneman, Zahn's Materials Training and Education Manager, and I'm here today with Allie Mitchell from Zahn's Training and Technical Support Team. Hey, Allie.
Hello.
So, what I wanted to know is, are there any common questions you get in tech support that's more related to materials and not actual, technical issues that maybe we could help out with a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So, I've definitely had a few customers lately calling in that their large span zirconia bridges or all-on-fours are cracking.
Okay.
And they're trying to figure out what's causing it, and then obviously what they can do so that the next time they mill the same unit and try and reproduce it, they don't get those same results.
Okay. So that's actually it's a great question, and I also see that out in the field when I'm visiting laboratories. So one of the first things I always want to ask is, are you using the correct zirconia? Not all zirconia is the same strength. So you want to make sure that you're using zirconia that has around 1150 to 1200 MPa. And some good examples of that would be the Noritake Katana HTML, the Zerlux 16 Plus, and also the Aman Gerbach HT Plus. So those are all really great zirconias to use, and they are plenty strong to handle your large span bridges or all-on-fours. The other thing is thermal shock. So zirconia is super strong, but its one weakness is thermal shock. So when you are sintering it, you want to make sure that you're using the proper program, and that your heat rate up and your heat rate down are very, very important. So just an example of, just an average example, you always want to follow the manufacturer's instructions, but usually your first heat rate up is going to be around 8 Celsius, 6 to 8, and then your second heat rate will be more around 5 or 3 Celsius. And then a long-term cooling is very important. So you don't want to rush the heating and you don't want to rush the cooling. That's really key. And don't take it out of the sintering furnace, even though the door is open. Don't take it out when the furnace is super hot. Let it naturally cool, and then when you can handle it with your bare hands, then you're safe to take it out. So those are the important tips for sintering. But then there's also some very important handling instructions that you need to follow. So you can create thermal shock with a furnace by heating or cooling too fast, but you can also cause thermal shock with tools when you're grinding on your zirconia. So if you're excessively grinding and you're heating up the bridge, you are causing a little tiny fracture that you don't see it yet, but it will grow. So you want to be careful, and you want to use water when you can and use the proper tools.
Okay. What are the recommended tools to use?
So there are a few that I do recommend. You don't need to have, a massive amount of tools. There are a few really good tools, and I'll share those with you. These are actually some that I use. And at the end of the video, I'll actually show you some photos and order numbers and descriptions if you need. But for actually cutting the bridge out of the disc, I will often use a high speed, but if you're using a low speed, you'd want to use a carbide, a nice tapered tip carbide to cut it out. You're going to smooth your screw down with your white rubber wheel that you use. Every lab has these all over the place, very common tool. Smooth the rest of the screw down with that, almost all the way. And then if you use a bullet-shaped rubber wheel, you can totally smooth the remainder of the sprue without gouging your zirconia. And all of these are gentle on the zirconia. And a lot of labs have entry-level position team members doing the cutting out and the post-processing. So one thing that I do like is that this rounded bullet-shaped tool, even for a new person, it's very easy for them to use because it's convex and the crown is convex, and when those two areas meet, you really can't gouge it because it's two rounded areas meeting. Whereas if they're using something else, like I've seen people use diamonds it's just a little easier to gouge, and you don't want to do that.
Okay.
After it is sintered, a lot of technicians like myself as a ceramist want to go in there and open up those embrasures, and you grab a diamond disc and you open that up.
Mm-hmm.
I strongly recommend doing that in the green state before you sinter. Just like if you're scoring a tile, if you've ever, laid tile, or you can score it and then easily crack it. The same thing is happening with your zirconia. If you take a diamond disc and approximately, you are causing a microfracture. And it will eventually end up fracturing completely through. So what I recommend is, this is actually one of my favorites. It is a really super thin, very flexible rubber wheel, and you can go into the embrasure. Not only can you go in and cut it nice and smooth, and a very fine embrasure, but because it's flexible, you can actually contour your line angles as well. So it does two jobs at once. If I have to do any adjusting to planes, I would use the white rubber wheel. Smoothing, when you're done, again, you can use the bullet-shaped green wheel. And inverted cone is really great. And I know it's hard to see, so I'll show all of these at the end. Inverted cone is really nice for making imbrication lines, or if you need to adjust some occlusal anatomy. With just those few tools, that's all you need to get a great result. And again, you want to do most of your adjusting before you put it in the furnace. You really don't want to grind on sintered zirconia. You don't want to create the heat in the first place, and you won't even start those fractures. The third thing that is really important is when you are doing your stain and glaze or your porcelain buildup. I don't know if you've heard that that's where they see the fracture.
Definitely.
Yeah, so unfortunately, a lot of the times the person that is staining and glazing will get the blame for fracturing the bridge. But the fracture probably didn't start there. It probably started during grinding.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you put it back into the furnace, now we're adding heat and we're cooling again. So it's shocking it a little more, and that crack grows. And sometimes you'll see the fracture as soon as it comes out of the furnace, or maybe even after it's sat there overnight, you come in the morning and it's in two pieces, which is traumatic because that took a long time to design, to mill, to sinter, and it's costly. So you want to avoid that. So it doesn't matter what porcelain you're using or what stain and glaze you're using. You're going to follow the manufacturer's recommendations. The one thing you are going to change is the heat rate. So you need it to heat up really slow, and I recommend 35 Celsius. 25 would even be better. 35 is safe. And then also when it's cooling, again, you really need to let it cool down slow, 35 C per minute. All furnaces are programmed a little bit differently, so you might have to figure out how to do that on your particular furnace. But basically, when it's cooling down, it's about a half an hour to 45 minutes to cool down. And I know it's hard to sit there and wait for the bridge, and it's got to go out, and you have to do, another layer or another stain and glaze. But I guarantee you're going to get some fractures if you rush it. So it's in your best interest not to rush it. It'll actually save you time because you won't have to remake the bridge. But if you follow those few things, you should have success every time. And as long as you're following proper design parameters for your connectors as well. Use proper zirconia, and always be thinking about thermal shock. So really, those are just the three things that will eliminate it from happening again. And it can happen anywhere in the process. Yes, you usually see it in stain and glaze, but you have to be aware that it could be happening anywhere along the process. So I hope that was helpful. Perfect. And I hope that will help some of your phone calls that you get, and you'll be able to easily answer that. And you can also refer them to the video. And if you guys are interested, we will also be making some more videos on post-processing and shading of the long span bridges as well. So
thank you, Pam.
Thank you, Allie. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.